And the tagline for Pietro Rosa, and Neat for that matter, is passion for innovation. And we really do live that. So we work very closely with many of the OEMs in order to find better manufacturing techniques for product and push them forward. And that culture, that mindset is infused here now. It wasn't in day one, it was just make to print. So now we're doing lots of new things with people, and that inspires our engineers.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Made in America podcast. I'm really excited to have Clive Cunliffe on. Clive's with New England Airfoil Products and the president of Pietro Rosa, North America. Clive, thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. Absolutely, Ari.
Well, Clive, it's the Made in America podcast, so we always start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Okay. Well, we're quite an interesting company, and essentially we're fundamentally a forging company. The forging part of the business is based in Italy, where the parent company is located, but we also are extremely vertically integrated. So from forging to machining to finishing metal products. And those metal products are basically used in all types of gas turbines that are used on land, sea and air in both civil and defence environments. So we've very excited about that, and the reason we're excited is because the business has been in existence for 132 or 134 years, and in around about 1955 we started making forged airfoil products, and we've evolved and evolved and evolved to become one of the leaders in manufacture of airfoils. So we enjoy it, and we've got a lot of know-how in the business.
That's pretty sweet, man. Do you guys make airfoil products outside of the New England Airfoil Products business, NEAP, or is all the airfoil stuff done here at NEAP in Connecticut?
No, we've got some facilities in Italy, and the products are also made there.
So the airfoils, the forging and airfoils are also made in Italy, as well as just the airfoil component and machining here?
Yeah, Italy is forging and machining and finishing. We are machining and some finishing. Yeah.
Nice. Well, listen, we got a ton to try and cover in a short period of time. I'm looking forward to sort of talking about the story of how Pietro Rosa came to Connecticut. It's a relatively newish story, but the kind of the legacy of New England Airfoil Products, or NEAP, its relationship to Albert Einstein, its long history of success in the New England region, the resurgence it's had since Pietro Rosa got involved in 2016, which is amazing and super strong. Talk about the future and what you see there. So we've got a lot to cover, but I'd like to start off kind of talking about you and your background, Clive, and sort of how you got into manufacturing in general and how ultimately that landed you, here in Connecticut. So let's start with the beginning.
Okay. Well, I used to work for Rolls-Royce in the UK. And I've
the engines or the cars?
Engines, not the cars. The cars are actually more interesting, but it was the aero engine division. So I've worked in the aero engine division, Rolls-Royce marine division, and the energy division. It's pretty much all over the place, really. Yeah. So I started off life as a mechanical engineer, and then progressed through supply chain, mergers and acquisitions, test house management, where they test the gas turbines. So that gave me really a very broad view of the business, which I've actually found immensely powerful for me, because as you progress in your career, it's nice to understand what all the facets are that go to the production and selling and testing of the end product. So that made it very powerful. I first met the people in Pietro Rosa, which is a fifth generation company, in 1992 or 4, so it's a very long time ago. And it was the previous generation owner that I met, and I liked what I saw then. And actually, they were a customer of ours, and they're a company that puts everything into it.
They were a customer, a supplier of Rolls-Royce?
Sorry, they were a supplier of Rolls-Royce. And Pietro Rosa is a company that puts everything into it. And as the years progressed, I ended up joining them. And this was in about 2007 or 8. I think it was 2007. And the agreement that I had with the owner, which is a guy called Mauro Fioretti, was that we would grow the business into more of a diverse structure. So that diversity was to include aero engine products, already did IGT products, and it's worked tremendously well. So then a few years ago, probably about 8 years ago, there was very much a recognition that the lion's share of the order book was coming, well, not the lion's share, probably 40% was coming from North America. So that seemed to be the rich, fertile ground that we needed to be in.
As opposed to coming from
Europe. Yeah.
And this is both on the civil and the defense?
It was principally all civil originally. On land-based gas turbines, we deal with a lot of Asian-type customers, which is very good business. But there are three big players in that area and some others. And we thought we've got to have a foothold in North America. So we originally looked at doing a greenfield site and doing some work. Essentially, it just got too complex for a first foot forward into North America. It's very difficult if you're a foreign entity. You don't really understand exactly the culture. You don't really understand the connections that are so important in this business. So in 2015, we met Governor Malloy and Catherine Smith, the commissioner, at one of the air shows. I think it was the Paris Air Show, I think. And they basically convinced us that Connecticut was a great place to do business in. And they made us some promises, and actually every one of those promises they've lived up to. And then, of course, the administration's now changed, and it's still good. So we ended up buying New England Air Force products. And the reason that we bought it was twofold, really. It was a company at the time that was underinvested, and it needed some more injection of goodwill, capital, and enthusiasm, which we got in abundance. Certainly the enthusiasm and the goodwill.
I think you're underselling it a little bit. I mean, we certainly get some numbers, but I mean, it had shrunk from a company that I think at one point it had several hundred employees to
at its peak it had got 100. At its peak it had got 450 people,
and it had shrank to I think just in the teens, just over a dozen.
Actually, when we agreed to buy it, it had got 17, and when we bought it, it had got I think 12.
So it was going in the wrong direction.
And then we peaked actually at 172 about 4 years later, 3 to 4 years later, which is pretty good.
Yeah, no, I would say.
So our dream for the business essentially came back. And our dream was that if we could put our culture into the business, our enthusiasm into the business, and the fact that it had not got the best recognition from its customers, that business underpinned by the goodwill that we've got with our customers, they would wash back. Because some of our customers were already New England Air Force, but they've gone away. And that's really exactly what happened, actually.
It worked.
It worked very well, yeah.
I'm just, I'm curious, maybe you could sit, and since you've seen it all, maybe talk about how you did that. You know, there's plenty of manufacturers and other businesses out there that buy, acquire, inherit in some way or another business. And turning around a struggling business can be very difficult.
Well, actually, yes, and it certainly was pretty difficult in the first year to 18 months. And a lot of the turnaround was based around the culture, I think. Because if you've got a core workforce that had worked there for a long time, some of these people have worked there 40 years, and all they've seen is it dwindling over the last few years, it was like throwing a drowning man a lifeboat. So they were really happy and put tons of enthusiasm to move us forward. What we did, and still do to an extent, but less so, is we really tried to infuse a lot of Italian talent in there. And we did it in a kind of sharing process. So people would come over, they would design and define manufacturing routes, select the machinery that we needed, and all the time bringing in new American personnel. And that journey has probably taken from January the 1st, 2016, when we bought the place, until now. And we're still on that journey. And what we try to do is make sure people are keen to go to work. I think that's the right thing. My own philosophy has always said, if you don't love going to work, don't work there. And we try and infuse that everywhere in the business. And that's certainly been true in Italy, and it's certainly true here. And it works well. Yeah.
So just to take a step back, so when you got the business, did you move people who were working for Pietro Rosa in Italy to here for a while?
Yes, absolutely.
And they got set up and sort of showed the way?
I think they did show the way, and one of the changes and one of the things that differentiates us from other manufacturers that do this kind of product is that there's a European way of doing things and there's an American way of doing things. And neither one or the other is particularly better than each other, but combined you can really create a mix of manufacturing methodology that works and gives you a differentiator. And the tagline for Pietro Rosa, and Neat for that matter, is passion for innovation. And we really do live that. So we work very closely with many of the OEMs in order to find better manufacturing techniques for product and push them forward. And that culture, that mindset is infused here now. It wasn't in day one, it was just make to print. So now we're doing lots of new things with people, and that inspires our engineers.
So it's almost saying that the push, the drive for innovation, for continuous improvement, not from build to print or print build from print, right? Which essentially is, maybe this is an aggressive way to describe it, but sort of like mindless order taking, right? I get something, I look at it, and I make it, but I don't get to infuse my own take on it. I don't get to take it and improve it. I'm just doing someone else's job. But by making sort of the passion for innovation central, everybody gets to own. How can I put my stamp on this to make it better in some way, faster, cheaper, smarter?
No, that's absolutely true. That is the way that it works. I also think that it actually inspires people to remain in the business. I can talk more about the Italian business because that's got such a long-standing place in the marketplace. People have been there for years and they're still inventing new things. We've got some good brains there, and those same brains we've sent over here over the last 5 or 6 years in order to try and infuse what they're doing. So I think our combination of Italian know-how and North American know-how is now beginning to pay off.
And you're now really starting to see the fruits of all that planting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very fortunate in the fact that the majority of our business here is in the defence sector. And because it's in the defence sector, it meant we were less affected by COVID. In terms of civil, we do civil, and it was affected, but that's beginning to come back, which is very good. And we've got a lot of things in the pipeline for 2022, so we're looking forward to 2022. And there's a lot of new innovation that's going on. So much so that we recently built a new product a new product introduction centre, which we've got a lot of our OEM customers looking at, and that will help garnish the type of work that we want. So you develop it at the front end, and then that should hopefully turn into a large production program
on the back end.
Yeah.
How do you support? Typically when you hear about innovation, right? That means it's usually a little bit more costly at some points to make that, right? Because you're investing the extra time to make something better, value add. So in a market that's so feels like often very price conscious, the aerospace kind of part purchasing is, how do you find a way to get the customers to believe enough in the innovation approach to want to spend a little bit extra to get what you guys do?
Well, they don't necessarily spend a bit extra, actually, because the innovation part of it is really the thing that yields the reductions that customers are looking for. And certainly the Aero engine and the IGT products have been pressing on price for years. So I believe that a company that doesn't innovate in terms of manufacturing methodology and promote new ideas to the OEM customers, they're always going to be in a tension situation with the OEM. We try to get in advance of the curve and offer new ideas how things could be done that will eventually yield reductions that they're looking for. But those reductions can't be at the expense of performance. They've got to improve the performance if possible, and they can't be at the expense of quality, because quality is first and foremost.
So that's a very fine needle you're trying to thread right there. It sounds like
it is, but in all honesty, we've become quite expert at it, and that's some of the knowledge that we've infused from Italy over here.
Oh, that's really fascinating. I'm excited to talk about. Let's take it just one little step back. Just an interesting point, I think, is that Neep itself has a connection to, the famous physicist Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity. And I know you weren't around for that, but
close.
But I think you know the story, and I think it would just be interesting to share it with the audience. So.
No, it is an interesting story, and the reason it's interesting, and again I keep harking back to Italy, but because it's such an old company, it really looks back on its history. It reflects on it. It lives for today, but it looks to the future. And New England Air Force Products was actually founded by an Einstein, okay? And this particular Einstein, George Einstein was his name, and he was the cousin of Albert Einstein. And they played the violin together, and they were very friendly, apparently, very, very friendly. And so much so that this Einstein and a guy called Campbell, who jointly started the company in 1945 as a tooling company, and then it became New England Aircraft Products in 1955, really evolved. And the things that they did were new manufacturing methodology in its time. So we loved this when we found this company.
I'd imagine.
Because we thought, this is great. It's got some real roots. It's got some heritage. So it's sort of 60 plus years old. In the airfoil business, and it played well to what we do, and we've actually utilised the Einstein connection in terms of the way we've promoted the culture there, and because Pietro Rosa and the group is a family-owned company, we introduced a thing called the Pride Award, which is the Einstein Pride Award, George Einstein Pride Award, and back in 1965. They had a list of attributes that people needed to display in the company, which were pride in what you do, the right respect, all these kind of things. So once a year at Christmas, the whole workforce has a vote on who's going to win the George Einstein Award. And there's a privileged car parking spot, an amount of money that's given to them, and a plaque that we have in the front. So it's gone
something
well.
to metacognate on for
celebrate.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. Yeah. What a great tie back to the whole idea of innovation and really that sort of connection back to what Pietro Rosa is all about. Talk a little bit more. You referenced the idea about at the Paris Air Show in 2015. That the Pietro Rosa had been looking at doing a greenfield project in another part of the United States. You made the decision to come to Connecticut in part, I guess, to build on what NEEP had. But just sort of talk about that decision. Obviously, you were a key part of it. What were some of the reasons you made those decisions? And you said all those promises have come true and more. And I wonder if you could just maybe kind of run that out. What are some of those things?
Well, we did quite a bit of due diligence all across the US, actually. And one of the very important things to us was connectivity, because we recognized that with a new business venture over here, established but new to us, we needed to have people going forwards and backwards from America to Italy in particular. Yep. And so the connectivity with Connecticut worked because there was a choice of airports that are relatively easy to get to and relatively cheap to fly to Europe compared to some of them. So that was good. The time zone was equally important to us. So we recognized pretty rapidly that it really got to be an East Coast time zone, because then you've got a window that you can operate within a normal working day. So all that was good. And then we looked at talent pipeline. And as you know, the sort of tagline for the ACM is Aerospace Alley. That's become sort of a colloquially coined term. And that is absolutely what it is. So because we knew that we couldn't do all the processes that we wanted to in-house immediately, we needed to be able to access lots of finishing people that we needed to manufacture product. So it's not called Aerospace Alley for any other reason than it being the right term.
Right.
So we found that very good for us. The other thing that we found, as I just mentioned, was the access to talented people in the aerospace business. And of course, the big draw here is Pratt & Whitney. So there's lots of people that have gone through all sorts of things, apprenticeship programs, colleges, degrees. They know manufacturing. So we've really benefited from that as well. When we were with Catherine Smith and Malloy, they were telling us all these things. And back in the day, which was a few years ago, there were, incentive loans to get you started, and they went very well. And you had to hold up your end of the bargain, and we did. That was the number of people that you employ, because obviously it all flows back through taxes. But the system that they did was great. We had warnings by people, oh, what the hell are you going to Connecticut for? Because that's a very expensive place to be. But equally, it might be a little bit more expensive than others, but you get more than other places. So it's a trade-off. And we are in the process of seriously looking at other businesses, particularly in Connecticut, because we want to invest more here, because we believe this is the place that we can do business.
Well, that's great. What about some of the other, you mentioned a lot about connectivity. You've talked about the ACM a little bit. Yeah. Have you guys kind of engaged with the business community? You mentioned ACM, so I imagine you're engaged there. Yeah. What other kind of engagement have you done in the business community in the area now that you've been here coming on 6 years next year, I guess?
Yeah. Well, the ACM was really the starting point. And they were and still are fantastic, because we didn't know anybody. They helped spread our wings into the aerospace community, so make the connections that we needed. We also joined the Metro Hartford Alliance, and the reason that we joined the Metro Hartford Alliance was because it's very easy just to be an aerospace-centric company, and that's all you think about and talk about. But we have and still do have aspirations to move into other areas. So the Metro Hartford Alliance has helped us a lot in terms of making connections with other businesses that really have got some sort of synergy with us in terms of how things are made, but they're not necessarily in aerospace. So they've been a good thing for us. Again, in the very early days, it's called Connecticut World Affairs Council. And the Connecticut World Affairs Council probably isn't as well known as the other two, but they've been rather instrumental in this networking across all of the US, because there are World Affairs Councils in different states.
Really?
Yeah. And they had the Italian ambassador over, and there was a session with him. So it helps networking in a big way, and they really do promote young people in terms of understanding the world and the way the world works and the issues that are in it and the possible resolutions. So that's been good for us. We're sponsors of the New England Air Museum, and largely because we like the name, because that's New England Air Museum, which is very closely to our
New England Airfoil products. Yeah, products. Not bad. It's a pretty cool museum. People don't always know where it is. I actually happen to have my daughter. Yeah. My daughter is very young. It'll be 7 in January. Friend just had a birthday party, and they had it at the museum. Yeah, and it was it's really cool. It was fun.
It really is good. So we were a sponsor of that. And in fact, I was there the other day, and I bought a 1917 propeller from a Curtiss Wright flying boat, and that's going to go on our boardroom in Italy on the wall.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's just a great place, and they're great people there.
Yeah.
The town of Farmington we love, in fact, and we're kind of at a stage the last 2 or 3 years since we got some traction, and it's giving back. So we do things like the flowers for Farmington and those kind of things, and whatever it is. But it's very nice, and they do business breakfasts, which actually introduce us to the bank that we're with. So that's very good. One of the things that I'm particularly proud of, because it's different, and I like this kind of thing, is we're sponsors of Hartford Athletic. And that has been one of those things that
feels a little bit on the nose for an Italian company to be sponsoring a soccer club. No,
it is, but the Italians just love football. Yeah, and of course I call it football.
Soccer, yeah, fair enough.
The Italians were coming over here, so they loved a venue to go to if they're staying here, which is something that's very close to the heart. And we've got a little banner around the edge, and it says New England Airfoil Products, or NEAP. It says actually we've got this corporate tent, so we can give away tickets. We have a thing called NEAP Night where all the employees and the families go, and it's been tremendous for us. And it's televised, so it's kind of free advertising. It adds interest, and we had an internal TV system that plays, all our quality things, metrics, what's coming up, what's not. And at lunchtimes, when Hartford are playing, we play the match, and people go into the works canteen and watch the match, and that's been very, very good. So that's part of giving back, and it's in the resurgence zone, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And then basically two more things. We joined a place called the New Hampshire Aerospace and Defence Export Consortium. Although it's not in Connecticut, it's kind of next door. Mm-hmm. And they've been very helpful for us in terms of reaching out to different areas, which is great, And then the other one, probably the biggest one we're a membership of, is the Aerospace Industries Association based in Washington, D.C. And that's been very good for intelligence on the industry, connections with all the big players. So, yeah.
You guys have really made a commitment to the business, commitment to the community, commitment to really like networking and just becoming a part of the fabric of the community. It's pretty impressive.
Well, actually, that brings me back to the point that we said we want to invest in Connecticut. That journey sounds great and a lot of fun, but it's not easy.
Right.
It's like having a friendship group at home. They're your friends.
Right.
And when you move to somewhere else, you've got to start all over again.
Right.
We will start all over again at some point, but we know that we've got a very solid foundation here with the network that we've built over that 5-year period, and it's working for us.
That's awesome. As you think about expanding, are you looking at expanding the existing business? Would you consider acquiring other businesses? Like, how do you foresee the growth of NEEP?
We're very much in acquisition mode now, actually. COVID stalled us from where we wanted to be. We should be in a different place, not geographically, but a different place now. But the 2-year COVID stall has inhibited that progress that we wanted. So now we're...
You're talking about from a NEEP perspective or just from a general growth?
From a NEEP perspective.
Okay.
Because, well, Pietro Rosa and NEEP perspective, because we do want other businesses. We ideally want them to be aerospace related or in an adjacent space. And when I say adjacent space, that could be space products, aerospace, or it could be in a different section of the gas turbine. So rather than cold section supply, could be hot section turbine supply as well. So we're actively in the marketplace now looking for the right acquisitions.
Well, there you go. Let it be known they're on the.
I thought I'd get it.
They're on the move. That's good.
Yeah.
How have you found? Just a couple other questions I wanted to drive at. You've grown the business significantly from a staffing perspective, right? From 12 to the peak 175.
Yeah, we're actually largely because of method improvement. I've got to say. Like I say, we weren't terribly impacted by COVID. We were a little bit, but the lion's share of the business was there. But we've done a huge amount of product improvement, and we've changed almost all the machines from when we bought it. So that's made things faster and less human resource dependent. So we have downsized from that, but we're still over 100 people.
Right.
But we envisage as we start getting into the middle part of next year and beyond, we'll be recruiting in a bigger way. But we're always looking for the right talent pipeline.
So talk about that. I mean, over the years, you've hired a number of people, obviously highly skilled to work on the machinery you have. Talk about sort of the strategies you guys have done to be so successful to keep that recruiting pipeline strong over the last 5 years. Well,
we've had interns from Tunxis and other places, and that's actually given us some seed talent, which is good. And I think particularly from a young person's perspective, people really don't know what they want to do, and from an ACM perspective, even those young people that are there, they think they want to be something, but they don't know what that something is. So if we can give them the benefit of joining us for a few weeks, a look around the facility, understand what to do, they just might have a mindset that they want to be engineers or manufacturing engineers or work within industry, and that's exactly what we've found, and it's been very good.
So a lot of the recruits have come out of school and stuff like that?
Some of the recruits have come out of school, some of them have come out of Tunxis, which is just around the corner, some of them come out of Central, so very good.
You guys do the apprenticeship program at all, or any?
No, it's something that we'd very much like to do, and I think had we not had the COVID experience, we were talking about it, to be honest with you, and I think give it another 2-3 years, and I think we will be doing an apprenticeship program, because that is a very old system, as we all know, that kind of died a death some years
Yeah.
ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really drained the old-fashioned know-how in the business. And I think that the larger companies, certainly if you're in the UK or in Italy or anywhere else, they can't depend on the big OEMs for having the apprentice program, and then those apprentices, as they mature, they want to move somewhere else. You have to do it yourself, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The apprentice program did go away for a long time. It did seem to have come out of favor. But when you sort of take a step back and think about that as a methodology for getting people into a business and helping them be successful, it just seems so smart. Just such a great way to do it.
And it's worked for centuries. I mean, you know, why would it not work now? You know? So, yeah.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. And then you mentioned earlier, I just want to talk a little bit about, you'd mentioned about space.
Yeah.
You guys been doing anything in sort of the space realm?
Yeah, we are now, actually. I won't tell you the people that we're doing the products for, but I mean, they say space the final frontier, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
I don't think it's the final frontier, but it's the next frontier.
Okay.
And that business is booming, and it will continue to boom. And if you look at all the things that the different countries, and in particular the US, are trying to do in space, we desperately want to be part of that. And we are just in the early stages of that. We've won some space orders. It's had a very interesting effect, actually, for the psyche of the engineers. And I'll tell you two little things. One's, they're detached, but actually the theme is the same. When we bought the Connecticut plant, we said that it would inspire the people that are working in Italy, because it's nicer to work for an international company than a single country company, because it gives the opportunity to get there, to see things, to do things. It's nice. And that's exactly what happened. It does help our recruitment drive in Italy. And it helps our recruitment drive here because it's just nice and different. And the fact that they're just north of Venice is a bigger...
Yeah, it doesn't hurt, yeah.
Now we've started manufacturing some space products. It makes people they think, this is great, it's a space part. I'm going to be having my hands on something that will be in space. And that's inspirational for people. It really is. More so than you can imagine, I think. So we found that to be an asset, and I think that will be an ongoing asset for us.
So one of the challenges that I've heard from other aerospace companies in terms of doing space parts is that the volumes are quite low.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, it's just pretty obvious, right? There's certainly far more passenger aircraft than there are space planes, right? By a factor of whatever.
Probably not the case in early 2020, though.
Yes. That's actually a fair point there.
Yeah.
So what's your thinking around that in terms of, you know, like there really isn't the same level of mass production for space components that there is. So how do you sort of think about that?
Well, I don't think the space business is all about making product that goes into space. The bigger arena within space is making product that does go into space, but you also need to capture some of the market. So the big revenue streams for space are being on a program that actually has got customers. So space is littered with satellites that need either burning up in the atmosphere, bringing back down to Earth, or they need repairs in space. So if you can be a provider of product that takes these vehicles into space or brings them back and garnish some of the revenue stream for what their duty in space is for, that's another strand to be very seriously looking at, I believe.
So not so much thinking about the Blue Origin flying people to low Earth orbit and back.
No,
but servicing the millions. I don't know. There's more satellites than you probably could count.
Servicing the space infrastructure,
right,
is something that is something worth thinking about for the future. At the moment, we're a parts supplier. As you say, there aren't a million things being built every day, and these things are becoming more reusable. But there's a different dynamic in space, and I think being I keep saying customer, I keep going back years, not a customer, but becoming a supplier to space companies changes the dynamics of a business, because aerospace is a long cycle business. There's a time to sort the quote out, there's a time to get in, it could be a very long time before the order actually comes through. Within the space business, it's much faster business. You've got to make it quickly, gets into space, and if you can't make it quickly and quote quickly, you'll never get the order. So a friend of mine once said to me not long ago, if you are a supplier to a space program, it makes you a better supplier to everybody else. And I think he's right.
Well, there you go. You heard it here. That's a great way. That's a great perspective. I want to just talk about one other thing, and I'm going to ask you about the New Englander, and then we can we'll put a wrap on it. You international company, so I assume that travel between the two locations, right, between Italy and the North American Connecticut, was changed during COVID.
Yeah.
How much were you traveling, and were people coming here sort of pre-COVID, would you say? How often was that travel for?
All the time. I mean, literally, there weren't that many people here, but we've probably got 5 transfer people from Italy to here. And then they would be supplemented with probably another 5 or 6 on a
here
rotation basis.
And how often were you going back for meetings, or people coming here to see the plant? Or
literally all the time. It was on a kind of weekly basis, in at peak spots, and certainly monthly. And people would stay for longer or
for a period of time. So clearly, COVID starts and the restrictions are there. Is travel back? Like, have you been back to Italy post?
Yeah, I've been back. I was there actually just a few weeks ago. I'll be there again.
Was that the first time?
The first time since COVID,
yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
And I was there for 2 weeks. Got an awful lot done in 2 weeks. And then I'm there again in January. And actually, I've got a personal view of what COVID's done for business and business travel. In some ways, I think it's better with the COVID, the way it worked in COVID, because there's been so many lessons learned. When COVID started, it was like sheep in the headlights. What do we do? How do we communicate? And if you've obviously noticed, but things like the Zoom and all the connectivity things, they've become so good now.
Yeah.
And we've moved technology 20 years in 2 years because of this.
I agree with that.
So you still do need the on-site meetings because you can connect better, but you also need to keep up with those other mediums. And I think it's moving the world faster. So it's good.
But now that you're back to traveling, I guess my curiosity was, are you finding that having been doing meetings over Zoom for almost 2 years, and now you've just started kind of traveling back again, give me your kind of assessment on, do you feel that the travel's worth the journey, or just stick to the Zoom, go forward? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think you can stick to the Zoom, go forward. And the reason I say that is that when you have a face-to-face meeting with a group of people, particularly if they're the people that are instrumental in doing something in the company for its benefit, either its structure, how things are done, how it's going to move forward, you can only get those sparky ideas when you're actually sitting down and talking to people, one-to-one or a group. On a Zoom call, it's much more impersonal, and the ideas just don't flow as easily. And I think the other area that the lack of travel has impacted is, as you can tell from this list of things that we're into, we're big networking people. And it's really difficult if you've got a new committee or a new board or a new this or a new that. You can go and have a cup of coffee somewhere, and then you can talk. Oh, talk to you afterwards. When that Zoom call's over, it's over, and it's a big barrier to entry to give the guy a call afterwards, rather than just wander up to him and say, So I think that's where it's very, very fruitful to actually meet people.
So you suspect that as things, whatever, the travel will kind of go back to more what you were doing previously? I
think it will in probably less frequently, but the connectivity will be as good because it'll be supplemented with Zooms, etc. But when it comes to domestic type travel, I mean, that's come back thick and fast. I mean, if you've been to an airport recently, a mayhem. I mean, so that's good. I think confidence has still got a long way to go with leisure travel. Everybody wants to go to the Far East, everybody wants to go there, but there's still very much a reservedness to it. And you can tell that by, if you look at the stock price of things like, cruise liners. I mean, they've become an incubator that nobody wants to get on it. And that'll take a long time to come back, I think. So wide-body aircraft will come back. It's coming back slower, but if you listen to the pundits that are trying to push the wide-body footfall for traffic, They believe it's going to come back very strong. And I think it will come back strong, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. It won't be overnight.
22 or 23 or later?
I think it's probably going to be mid to late 23 before we get even approaching the numbers that we had before.
In like 2019 or, approaching the 2019 numbers.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good perspective. I'm always kind of interested to hear what people say. Yeah. I hope you're wrong to the long side.
I do as well. Very much so. Yeah.
Let's just talk about real briefly. We'll go to kind of rapid fire and wrap it up. There's you brought with you the new New Englander magazine. Let's call it. And I just find it's a fascinating, interesting story, and it harkens back to what I think is sort of the theme that we've talked about all this time is. The way that Pietro Rosa has done business, it very much feels like a family business and has embraced the legacy of the business that they have acquired and seems much to the success both of Pietro Rosa and to New England Airfoil Products. And this magazine is a part of that. I wonder if you might just share with the audience.
Well, we talked a little bit about the culture of the business, how we infuse the culture. And shortly after we bought it, probably 3 months after we bought it, somehow we unearthed an old New Englander magazine, and there's a particular guy that works there, and he collected these for years. Incredibly nice guy, still works there, and he showed the owner of the company and myself this old newsletter called The New Englander from 1965, and he'd probably got about 40 of them that he'd kept. And it gave a bit of a story. This is the golf tournament that we're running. This is this is that, this is the other. So we thought, what a great idea to resurface this thing and call it the New Englander. And it's become very popular. And we do it 2 to 3, mainly 2 times a year. And we started that back in, I think, the second year that we had the place. So in there, I use it as a bit of an educational tool. So it talks a little bit about the industry. It talks about a little bit about new technology. It talks about how we are interacting with the world, the challenges of the world. And then we also have sections on new recruits. So there's a little piece on everybody that joins the company. The challenges that we face, the opportunities that we have, and marriages and births and all the rest of it. And it's really well liked, and we send it to quite a few places, that have it outside. And it really does do well because people like it. And that's most companies don't do it of our size.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and it's just it is a cool little kind of publication, a fun thing to do. And again, it just harkens back to the success you've had, really embracing the legacy of the business that Pietro Rosa bought. And I mean, it just seems like what a great success story.
No, well, thank you. I mean, we're very pleased with moving here. And like I say, we want to invest more. So we
look forward to it, and we'll have you back when that happens. Well, we always wrap with a rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready?
Fire away.
Bring it on. Here we go. This is a baseball question, so we'll see where you go with this. Pick between this or that, Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
There we go. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Starbucks.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Exotic every time.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Sports car.
Do you have a favorite business book?
I've got lots. I wouldn't like to draw
a favorite?
Yeah.
Fair enough. If you had to do something other than be the president of Pietro Rosa North America, and it could be anything in the whole wide world, Clive, what would you do?
Astronaut.
Really? Oh,
new place to be. New holiday, exotic destination.
That is an exotic destination. I'll give it to you there. What's something, Clive, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's propelled you to all the success that you've had?
I know exactly what it is, and I tell everybody the same thing. If you don't enjoy what you do, don't do it. And I've told that to our children. I've told it to many of the younger people that are in the business. And I was and still am one of those guys that used to run to work because I couldn't wait to get there because of the new challenges that were there. And I think the day that inspiration goes from you, then you shouldn't be going to work. You should either retire or find something else to do.
There you go. What's something, Clive, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you could go back and tell young Clive and he'd listen to you, you think it'd really propel him?
That's a really tough one. But the thing that I do notice as I get older, time goes faster. That's the problem. So if you've got an ambition, face the ambition today and don't put it off until tomorrow. So I think if you've got a great idea or you've got a great thing that you want to do it, because tomorrow might not come, and if it does come, it might be too late. So go into action with what your beliefs are today, and you'll probably do well by it.
I'm going to leave it right there. Clive, thank you so very much for coming on. It has been a pleasure talking to you today.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Enjoyed it immensely.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.